Welcome to Game Changers with Molly Fletcher, where we take you behind the scenes with peak performers to learn what makes them tick and discover how you can apply their lessons to your life. I'm your host, Molly Fletcher. Before Airbnb, the thought of opening up your home to a stranger seemed crazy to most people. But today's guest, Joe Gebbia, turned that crazy idea into a reality and one of the world's most innovative companies. Joe is the co-founder of Airbnb and chairman of Airbnb.org, his nonprofit brainchild that provides housing to people in crisis and is currently assisting over 100,000 refugees of Ukraine. Well, Joe recently stepped down from his day-to-day role at Airbnb to pursue other projects. He remains on the company's board and continues to chair Airbnb.org. A lifelong basketball fan, Joe is also a member of the San Antonio Spurs investor group. He's been named to Fortune 40 Under 40 and Fast Company's Most Creative People. In our conversation today, we talk about the incredible story behind Airbnb, leading the vision and purpose-driven teams. Let's dig in. This is my conversation with Airbnb co-founder Joe Gebbia. You're an Atlanta guy, so I got to start there. Where do you think, or who do you think helped cultivate? You have an unbelievable entrepreneurial spirit, clearly. Where did that come from?
My spirit came from my parents. I grew up in a household of two self-made, independent parents who worked for themselves. You know, they were sales reps for different industries throughout the Southeast. And so our household was always full of boxes of products they were selling. I remember, vivid memories as a child, getting in the car with them and going from shop to shop as they were selling, in one case, health food supplies, health food products. And I'd watch them interact with the store owners, and I'd see, the lengths that they'd go to nurture a relationship with these owners. They'd stay late stocking shelves. They'd go so far above and beyond with a real service mentality to their customers. And so I saw them when they did well, and I saw them when things weren't going so well. But in either case, they were forging their own path. And I remember from a very early age thinking to myself, one day, I want to work for myself. I want to have my own company. But as a kid, I was always starting things. I remember my first memory of, you could say, entrepreneurship was in second grade. In second grade, I loved to draw, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles had just come out. And I was drawing these characters, and I'd mount the drawings on this poster board, and I would sell them to my classmates for $1.
Nice.
And they loved them.
That's awesome. I love that. Wow.
It was a great feeling, it was the first time where you experience you can create something and somebody will give you something in exchange for that. It did so well that one of the teachers pulled me aside one day and said, "Joe, I'm getting too many complaints from the parents. These kids are asking for extra lunch money, not to buy more lunch, but to buy your drawings.
That's awesome.
And we need to stop this."
No way. And I'm thinking your margins were pretty good on that since the school was supplying the paper and the pencil.
It was my first run-in with regulation.
So I also dug this fun fact. You were a ball boy for the Hawks. Is that right?
One day, I'm reading the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And every morning before school, I would read the newspaper. I open up the sports section, and there's an article about bat boys for the Braves and ball boys for the Atlanta Hawks. And at the end of the article, it said, if you're interested in being a ball boy, write a letter about yourself and send it to this address. I thought, wow, what a cool job that would be. I have to submit a letter. So I wrote this letter, and I remember I mailed it on the very last day of the deadline. It was right before spring break one year. We're going off to Florida somewhere. And on the way to Florida, we're taking a road trip with my family. We stopped by a post box and we dropped the letter in. Now, months go by, I forget about it. That summer, I get a phone call from, it said Turner Broadcasting System, Atlanta Hawks on the caller ID. Get a phone call. It's Chris Tucker, the head trainer of the Atlanta Hawks, says, "We've got your letter. We want to interview you. Come down to the stadium for an interview." So I'm like, oh my gosh, this is insane. So I go down. There's a bunch of other, high school students just like me, and go through the interview process, and they give me the job. And that season, I started as a ball boy for an NBA team. As somebody who loves basketball, this was like an unbelievable proposition for a 16-year-old.
Yeah, totally.
You're going to get paid to hang out
Wow.
with NBA players.
And by the way, you got to be pretty careful when you're that guy at the end of the court and these, these cats, run past the line a little bit. Because those guys aren't small.
So the entry level of a ball boy is you're wiping sweat on the court.
Got it. Okay.
So a player falls, you got to run out there quickly, with the towels. You've seen this in the games. Sometimes, though, the play will transition too quickly, and they'll actually come running back down the court while you're still out there wiping the sweat.
You better go, man.
You better go, man.
Yeah, that's right. But you've upgraded a little bit, right? Now you got a little ownership piece of the Spurs, which, I mean, as such a storied franchise, that's got to be pretty special. What intrigued you about that opportunity?
Going back to my love for business and design, when I was a ball boy for the Hawks, I was equally intrigued with what's going on behind those closed doors. Because you are behind the scenes, you're running around, running errands for the players and interacting with the general manager and the president and operations. And I was always intrigued about, well, how does all this work behind the scenes? And so it's always been in the back of my mind. Maybe if one day, I'd ever be lucky enough to be in a position where I'd be able to get to go deeper from an ownership position in an NBA team. So fast forward from my 16-year-old self to my 40-year-old self, and that opportunity has come true. And so San Antonio, obviously, incredible run in the early 2000s, true dynasty. And, the minute that I heard about it, the possibility, I jumped on it, and I have been, so happy to be involved. It's truly a special organization. Culturally, it reminds me a lot of Airbnb. Very values-driven, very mission-driven. They want to win, and they want to win with heart.
And so what will your involvement be with the team?
So I'm a minority shareholder. I'm a minority owner of the team. I'm not involved in the operations. Definitely a big fan. And I've done, a little bit of philanthropy with the team down in San Antonio. Yeah, it's been really excited to be involved.
We've got to dig into the origin story, right, of Airbnb, which is so cool. And I'm sure you've told this story 1,000 times, Joe, but tell me, what inspired you with this idea, right? Because I've heard you tell this story, but I want everybody else to. It's pretty awesome.
There's actually a pre-story to Airbnb that not a lot of people know about.
Let's go. Love it.
So it's 2005. I've just graduated from the Rhode Island School of Design in Providence, Rhode Island. And I had my sights set on moving out to San Francisco to be involved in the internet. And it's after graduation, and I'm having a yard sale. So all my things are out on the grass, and people are walking by, and it's getting kind of late, and I'm getting ready to pack up and head in. And this guy pulls up in this red Mazda Miata, and he gets out and he starts looking through my stuff. He starts going through some artwork that I'm selling. He picks up a screen print that I made, and he says, "I want to buy this." So I sell it to him, and we get to chatting. His name's Joseph. He's on a road trip going across the United States before going into the Peace Corps. And it becomes clear to me that this guy is totally solo and alone in Providence at night. And for whatever reason, he seems like a cool guy. And I say, "Hey, you want to grab a drink later?" So later that night, we're meeting up at this old-timey bar in Providence called the Custom House. And he's telling me all about the Peace Corps. And I'm telling him all about RISD. At this point, it's getting kind of late. And as I motion for the check, I make the mistake of asking this question. "So where are you staying tonight?" And he makes it worse by saying, "Well, actually, I don't have a place." And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, it's 12 o'clock at night. It's Providence. The hotels are probably closed. And before I know what I'm doing, I utter the words, "Why don't you stay on an airbed in my living room?" And the minute I said it, I instantly regretted it. I go, "What are you thinking?"
Right.
I mean, I think this guy is who he says he is, but I don't know if he's going to the Peace Corps. I don't know who he is. I don't want to get kidnapped and stuffed in the back of a a red Mazda Miata trunk. That's a small trunk. And before I know it, we're back at my place. I've set up the airbed in the living room. I head to my room, close the door, and I lay there trying to fall asleep. I'm staring at the ceiling thinking, oh my God, what have I done? There's a random stranger in my living room. Thankfully, we get up the next morning, everything's fine. We go to brunch, amazing brunch. He goes off to the Peace Corps. I get postcards from him from all over the world when he's traveling. We're still friends to this day. He stays at my place anytime he comes to where I live. And the poster that he bought, the print that I made, hangs in his classroom in Chicago where he's a teacher. But that experience, I'll never forget. It was overcoming the fear of a stranger in your home, of which I had a lot. There's something beautiful that can emerge if you're able to trust somebody. And so when I moved to San Francisco from Providence, I packed up my red Jeep Cherokee with all my possessions. If it didn't fit, I didn't take it. And one of the things that I fit in there was that airbed. And so the next year, 2006, into the next year, 2007, I got to San Francisco, which at the time was, to me, the epicenter of entrepreneurship. It was everything the first .com seemed to inspire me when I was in high school, watching the .com unfold from my bedroom in Atlanta, thinking, wow, one day I want to go to this mythical Silicon Valley place to be a part of this conversation, to start one of these internet companies. They were so exciting to me as a high school student. So here I am now. I'm in Silicon Valley. I'm in San Francisco, 2006. YouTube had just gotten acquired by Google. There was this influx of software engineers and entrepreneurs and talent to the city. The internet was coming back. This was like, I think, one of the most exciting times to be in Silicon Valley, 2006, 2007. So around that time, I start calling somebody that I knew from RISD, one of my best friends, a conspirator of ideas, a guy who I truly believed if he put us in the same room, we could think of big ideas together. His name is Brian Chesky. I start calling him. I said, Brian, I know you live in Los Angeles now after you graduated. I don't know what you're doing down there, but you got to get up to San Francisco. This is where the action is. And after a year of recruiting him, he finally says yes. He packs his life into his Honda Civic, courageously quits his job, moves to San Francisco. Here we are, two unemployed friends with all the potential. We're probably 25 years old at this point, and we're dreaming up all these ideas of things we could start together, when all of a sudden, a letter shows up in our mailbox. I open the letter. It's addressed to me. It says, Dear Joe, your rent is now 35% higher. It's due on this date next month. Your landlord. I tell this to Brian, and we both, like, all of the optimism and excitement completely evaporated. And suddenly there was this dark, stormy cloud that formed over our apartment of, what the hell are we going to do? We're going to get evicted. That's what's going to happen. And it was suddenly our backs were against the wall, and we had to figure out, well, how are we going to solve this math problem? Our bank accounts are tumbling because we have no income, no paychecks. Our rent has just gone up like exponentially. We have to save this apartment. What are we going to do? And so we start sketching ideas. One day, I'm sitting in our living room, I have my laptop open, and I've got the website open of a design conference that's coming to San Francisco. And this is not just the Your Ordinary Conference. This is the international one with 5,000 people descending on the city. And so in big red letters at the top of the screen, it says, hotels sold out. Molly, like, every light bulb went off over my head in that moment, because I looked up over the edge of my laptop into the vastness of our tiny living room. And I thought, where are people going to stay? What if they stayed here with us? We're going to the conference. We want to meet people. This could be really interesting. I walk over to the closet. I pull out that same airbed. I blow it up on the living room floor. I email Brian and say, Brian, what if we host people in our living room on the airbeds for the IDSA conference? He goes, it's a great idea. And actually, I got a tape measure out, and I measured the room, and I saw we could fit not just one, not just two, but 3 airbeds in the living room. So I ran to Bed Bath & Beyond, made our first, capital investment in our company, inflated 3 airbeds. We started to make a website. It was a very simple 4-page website. Pictures of us, pictures of the airbeds, pictures of the neighborhood, priced very economically at $80 a night. And we decided, even at this very, this one weekend project, we wanted to design an experience. So we would offer airport pickup. We'd offer a map to San Francisco, a subway pass, and other things, including breakfast. So I'm laying in bed that night thinking, well, what are we going to call this thing? Well, it's kind of a bed and breakfast. It's for designers. Maybe this is an airbed and breakfast. So I get on to GoDaddy and I registered the domain airbedandbreakfast.com, 18-character URL. I don't recommend that. The next day, later that week, we designed and published this website. So now we have our next challenge. How do people hear about airbedandbreakfast.com? Well, we email the conference and we say, we have a solution to your housing problem. The conference loves the idea, blasts it out to 5,000 people. We also emailed it to design blogs. And Molly, at this point, I had never really gotten press. I didn't even know how you got press. How do you even get on a blog? I remember we emailed them like tips@designblog.com, and it was kind of like a Hail Mary. The next morning when we woke up, it felt like Christmas with presents under the tree. We were at the tops of every major design blog around the world. And with that awareness, people started emailing us from all over, from Brazil, from London, from all parts of the United States. And we had so many people sending us, inquiries. They were started to try to convince us why they should be the first guests on this Airbed and Breakfast website. We had the design portfolios, their LinkedIn profiles, their resumes. We finally selected 3 guests, Kat, Amol, and Michael, who were all over the age of 30. Michael was a husband and father of 5 from Salt Lake City. Amol was a grad student at Arizona State University, and Kat was a web designer from Boston. They all completely broke the profile that we had in mind of who might stay on an airbed in somebody's living room. Well, it's probably going to be a, recent college grad, kind of hippie. Maybe they don't have a lot of money. This was actually very different. These are like professionals and family. And so that even in that first instance, it opened up our minds to like, maybe there's a wider range of people who would want to stay in people's homes when they travel. So that weekend, we had an amazing time with them. We gave them a great experience in San Francisco, our favorite burrito place in the Mission. We went to the conference together. We had house parties. They met our friends at night. It was a truly social experience. And I remember the day that they left, they checked out. The door clicks closed. I look at Brian and I go, did we just get paid to make friends?
Oh, wow.
And that's when the gears began to turn. And so at that point, we then brought on our third co-founder, Nate Blasharczyk, who was my roommate in that same apartment. And he was the technical genius to match our design backgrounds. And so the art and science was a very powerful combination for us throughout the history of the company. And we began to build. And it wasn't obvious even that this was going to be a big idea. We did this to make some extra cash, of which we made $1,000 that weekend, by the way. We saved our apartment. It was actually when we went home for the holidays 2 months later. I went back to Atlanta. I'm with my family and my friends. They're asking, so what are you up to? How's everything out in San Francisco? I go, well, don't really have too much going on, but we had this one funny thing happen, Airbed and Breakfast. I tell people the story, and one of 2 things happened. People, they got really engaged and they said, oh my God, that sounds incredible. I would travel like that. Or people did the exact opposite. They said, that's the creepiest, strangest thing I've ever heard in my life. They would walk away and leave the conversation. Brian had a similar experience. So when we came back in January, we realized, wow, this really charges people. People get really excited about this. This is the thing we should be working on. And so we started building the next version for the next big event coming up, which was South by Southwest in Austin, Texas. Hotels sell out every year. And we thought, well, this is the perfect storm for us to relaunch. And by the way, South by Southwest is where some of the biggest internet companies launched successfully. Twitter, Foursquare, others. So we thought that this was going to be our rocket ship to the moon. So we build all-nighters for weeks. We relaunch just in time for South by Southwest. We get an incredible turnout of 2 hosts signing up, and we get 2 reservations. One of them was us.
Jeez.
It turned out to be a dismal failure of epic proportions. We got barely a mention on a tech blog. And we came home from that experience thinking, okay, maybe this isn't a good idea. Nate moves back to Boston. The team's kind of falling apart. A couple months go by, and people start asking us. They say, hey, I'm going to Paris. I'm going to Los Angeles. I'm going to go to Vancouver. How can I use your website to stay in somebody's home? There's no event taking place. There's no conference, but I want to stay in a home. And we thought, well, maybe the big opportunity isn't housing for conferences. Maybe it's just a travel site. And people also said, I want the convenience of paying online with my credit card. Because up until this point, if you wanted to book a home, it was through classified websites, the Craigslists of the world, where you're wiring money to a stranger or you're paying cash on arrival, which is super awkward. You don't want to be in a business where people exchanging cash in person in someone's home.
Right. Exactly.
So we decide we're going to actually revamp this idea to be a travel site where you can book a home anywhere in the world with the convenience of your credit card, which at the time you couldn't do anywhere. But the problem is with a 2-sided marketplace, you have to get supply and demand growing at the same rate, which is really hard.
Hi there, it's Molly. I've got some exciting news to share. I'm thrilled to announce I've launched my first ever on-demand course, Up Your Game. Unlock the drive to fuel next level success. Have the past few years left you burned out and stretched thin? Like, despite your success, you know you're capable of more. Maybe you've lost your purpose and that inner fire to pursue your dreams. If so, you are not alone. So many of us have been there. As a top sports agent for 15 years, representing and working with the best of the best, I've seen and helped countless people unlock their drive to accomplish great things and finally live out their dreams. That's why I've crafted a brand new on-demand course to help you unlock your potential to fuel next level success. In my new course, Up Your Game, I share the critical 8 keys that you absolutely must use to get unstuck and to finally realize your fullest potential. This course, it's not inspirational fluff. It gives you action guides so that you can apply it to your life and take action right now. So are you ready to up your game? Sign up for my new course today at mollyfletcher.com/course. That's mollyfletcher.com/course. I can't wait for this course to change your life in incredible ways. Check it out.
Starting 2-sided marketplaces are incredibly difficult. So you need some kind of, forcing function to get them going. Now, in the summer of 2008, there was one topic that gripped the nation. There was one thing that was the zeitgeist of every conversation. It was the presidential election, Obama, McCain. As we were watching the headlines, Obama gets the nomination for the DNC, taking place in Denver, Colorado. We quickly see these headlines saying, housing crisis hits Denver. Where will they stay? There's 20,000 hotel rooms and 80,000 people coming to fill Invesco Stadium. This was our perfect time to relaunch and solve this very hair on fire problem. So we did exactly that. And we had, in a very short amount of time, 800 hosts sign up in Denver. We had well over 100 bookings taking place. Our marketplace started to work. It felt like magic, Molly. This was our dream come true. I remember calling my mom saying, Mom, this is it. Our rocket ship to the moon is taking off. And then all of a sudden, the DNC ended. And crickets emerged on our platform. If only there was a political convention every weekend, we would have had a very successful business. But here we were in a stage of startups that is referred to as the trough of sorrow. Now, the trough of sorrow happens after your launch of initiation, where your traffic goes up, you got a lot of press and a lot of buzz. There's a wearing off of novelty, where people move on to the next thing. And you enter the trough of sorrow, which is where you don't quite yet have the key ingredient at the early stages of a company, which is product market fit. We didn't have that yet. And I often think of these two gears, product and market, that are trying to touch to get momentum going. But there's this mysterious gap in between that separates them. That's called the trough of sorrow. It can last for weeks, months, or sometimes years. And our trough of sorrow, I also call it the Midwest of analytics. It's perfectly flat. There's no growth. There's only one way out of it, and that's through sheer creativity. At this time in our history, this is now September of 2008, we're hitting a low point here. This is a moment where it's perfectly reasonable to quit.
Right.
We're making $200 a week in our fees, crushing it. For three guys living in San Francisco, that is not going to make ends meet. We have no other sources of income. We've tapped out mom and dad. We're not, they've helped as much as they could. We're really on our own here. We're now 27, 28 years old, and we're trying to keep our spirits up. It's late one night. It's 2 a.m. in the morning. We're in the kitchen of our apartment, Brian and I, joking around, just trying to keep a light mood. And we started joking, we're called Air Bed and Breakfast. What if we made breakfast for our host to give to our guests? Well, we couldn't be something that, you have to refrigerate. So maybe it's like breakfast cereal. Okay, cool. We'll make breakfast cereal. Well, what if it was politically themed? Because anything with Obama's face on it was selling like a hotcake. And we thought, wow, yeah, we can make Obama-themed breakfast cereal. Well, what would we call it? Oh my God, what if we called it Obama O's? The breakfast of change.
Nice.
We could picture these boxes. His would be blue with his caricature and a big smile and rays of light coming up from behind him. And then we're like, well, we'd have to make a McCain cereal, of course. We're, bipartisan company. So get onto Wikipedia. We see he's an officer in the Navy. And we think, well, of course, Captain McCain's, a
Perfect.
maverick in every bite. We had the taglines and everything in our mind. And so then we were sort of faced with this dilemma. How do you make breakfast cereal? Well, I started by calling Kellogg and General Mills. They promptly hung up on me. I started then calling local Bay Area cereal companies. They at least listened to the pitch and then declined. And so then we're back to the drawing board. How do you make breakfast cereal? Well, it dawned on us, you don't have to make it. It's already made. You just go to the store and buy it. So I found a RISD alum in Berkeley who had a print shop, and I went and pitched him. I said, Fred, whatever you can do, we've got no money. Literally, we're about $20,000 in credit card debt at this point. Fred, is there anything you could do? He goes, wow, you really want this, don't you? And I go, yes, anything you do for us. Well, he goes, I'll print these at no charge, but you can pay me on commission every time you sell a box. But I'm only going to make 500 of each for you. And I go, Fred, did you say 500 of each? He goes, yeah. I go, Fred, that's a limited edition collector's cereal box. We can charge more than your average cereal box. We could charge $40. So he prints the boxes. We make the product shots. We put up ObamaOs.com. We send boxes out to every media outlet on the face of the planet. Oprah got these. The morning shows got them. Everybody got these. And when they opened the box, our package, to see these two beautifully designed Obama O's and Cap McCain's, we got calls back from just about everybody because they wanted to cover this phenomenon. What is this?
Right,
so
sure.
We get on CNN one day. We do a live interview on CNN talking about breakfast cereal, not even about our company.
Wow.
We're talking about breakfast cereal. It became the number one political video on CNN that day. Orders came flying in. As we get orders, at the end of the day, I'd run to the grocery store. I'd buy all the O's off the shelf. I'd have 3 shopping carts full of cereal boxes, truck them back to the house. Our kitchen turned into a production line where we'd unbox the cereal, take the bag out, put it in our own custom designed box, hot glue it on the top, and ship it out to customers. We end up selling out of Obama O's. So 500 boxes at $40 a box. We made $20,000 selling breakfast cereal.
Unbelievable.
The Cap McCain's, didn't actually sell so well.
They didn't?
Not quite so much. So I think somehow like our breakfast cereal was a predictor of the outcome of the election. um,
Yeah.
but there was a moment where Brian and I are in the kitchen. Our fingertips are burned raw from this hot glue gun. We got paper cuts all over.
Right.
And we look at each other with the absurdity of it all. And we go, did Mark Zuckerberg or Steve Jobs ever have a moment like this in the building of their company? Like, are we totally off base here?
Right. Oh, well, apparently not. I hope you saved one or two of those boxes for you guys.
Oh, I do. And
along the way. I'm getting my legal hat on here for a hot second, wondering about the name and likeness, the serial repurposing. But it was a limited edition, which was genius.
it was all numbered on the top. It was impeccably designed, every detail. Look, when you're starting out and you're completely under the radar and completely insignificant, I think you can do these kinds of things.
Yeah.
Because the scale is so small, it doesn't matter. And I think, for anybody that has these kinds of harebrained ideas and then stops themselves short, because say, well, maybe I shouldn't do that because of X, Y, or Z. It probably doesn't matter.
Yeah.
At the small, early initiation scale of an idea, I always encourage people to go for it. To not edit themselves too early in the stage of an idea. Ideas are very fragile. They need protection. They need to see the light of day. Yeah. So anyway, with the cereal, we paid off our credit cards. We got back to zero, and we were still in the trough of sorrow. The thing that saved us was this, and this is a lesson for any entrepreneur. We got into a program called Y Combinator, which is for startups in Silicon Valley. And in the program, our mentor, a guy named Paul Graham, gave us the single greatest piece of advice that we ever got. He asked us, "Where's your market?" And at the time, we didn't really have a market. We had maybe 30 hosts in New York City. That was our biggest city with hosts. And he goes, "So your customers are in New York City, and you're here in Mountain View, California." And we're confused. We're like, "Yes, we're here for your program." He goes, "What are you still doing here? Go to New York City. Go meet your customers." And up until this point, we had adhered to this myth of Silicon Valley that was you had to code your way through problems because that's the only way you could ever scale. Suddenly he says, do things that don't scale. Actually go talk to your customers, learn from them, listen to them. And in those trips, Brian and I would get on a plane. We'd fly across the country. We'd go door to door. We meet every single host. We took free pictures of their place with a professional camera to increase the likelihood of getting a booking. We listened to their problems and we made changes based on what they were telling us. Oh, I'm really frustrated with the calendaring system, or the review system isn't really working for me. Oh, we can fix it. And so after doing one trip, our revenue went from $200 to $400 in 1 week. I thought our system had a bug.
Yeah, right.
Like, there's no way that our revenue just doubled by taking pictures and making a couple changes to our product. Our advisor, Paul Graham, looks at our numbers and he goes, "What are you still doing here? Go back to New York City and do it all over again." And Molly, we went week over week, revenue doubled, 400 to 800, 800 to 1600, 1600, 3200. And we've never looked back.
It's so cool because to me, you had a level of drive throughout that process that I think sometimes people wonder, gosh, man, you had a lot of signs that you could have gone, man, this isn't it. This isn't going to work. But you had a mindset of there's got to be a way. You were curious. You were disciplined. You were driven. I mean, you were all these. Where do you think, Joe, where's that drive in you to keep going when there might have been somebody going, dude, like, how many signs do you need that this is, cereal what? Like, get me inside of where you think that comes from and what drove you to keep going when it could have been easy to quit.
Somebody told me the other day at a party, there's three reasons that drive entrepreneurs to push this kind of stuff. You have issues with your dad, you have a learning disability, or a near-death experience. I think that I have a fourth to add to that, which is a joy for proving people wrong.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I've had a lot of people throughout my life, tell me that you can't do that, or you're not capable, you can't pull that off. And even at RISD, I had professors who I really looked up to. One in particular, who, when I presented my ambitious solution to our class assignment, he looked me dead in the eye and he said, he's a British, he's from Wales. He goes, Joe, I really don't think you can do it. Really focus on the smaller scale. And he walked away. And in that moment, I go, oh.
It's on.
It's on.
It's on. Wow, I love it.
In those early days of Airbnb, in the time frame I was talking about, if you map things out on a spreadsheet, the logic would have told you at the end of the calculation to stop working on this and go find a job or work on something else, because this is not going anywhere. The math did not add up. You could poll people, and majority of people say, I would never stay in a stranger's home. That would never happen. Never let somebody in my home. And the thing that pushed us through all those times of, rallying against the logic was the fact that we hosted 3 people in our home, and we had a firsthand experience. And anytime somebody would doubt us, which there were plenty, somebody would say, this is never going to work, which there were plenty, of which all the people that declined investing in us, which were many, I would always think back to well, they don't know. They haven't had that experience of what it's like to welcome 3 people in, to become friends with them, to see them light up by seeing a city through your eyes, by getting a truly local experience when they travel. Brian, Nate, and I would just say, you know what, we're just going to keep going until enough people can see what we saw.
And prove them wrong, which you've done. You went from not being able to pay rent to burned fingers from the hot glue gun, fingers cut from putting together cereal boxes, running to the grocery store at night, to achieving billionaire status before you turned 40. What to you, if you had to really sum it up, would you say is the foundation to your success?
It's the power of imagination. A lot of what we've achieved, we imagined, and we dreamed about, and we talked about with each other. Brian and I would be sitting alone in our living room, which was our quote office for many years, just the 2 of us. Nate wasn't even, necessarily there most of the time. And we would just dream together. We would imagine what does it look like if one day, we actually have employees? What does it look like when we hire our first person to work with us? I remember we went to visit YouTube in 2008, and we walk into YouTube's campus, and they got this giant rock climbing wall in the lobby, and a huge cafeteria, and there's people buzzing around campus. And Brian and I came back, and we were inspired to go wow, what if one day we have people working for us come to a place where they feel inspired. We went to visit Zappos, and we met with the now late Tony Hsieh, and got to meet him. And he opened up a whole channel of thinking for us around culture and what's the importance of company culture. And his advice to us was something that profoundly affected how we grew our company. Because when you walked into Zappos, it's probably true today, it was definitely true in 2009, you could feel the energy and the optimism inside their office everywhere you went. The people were so happy to be working at Zappos. But it was so contagious, and we deconstructed the whole thing. We got back to our apartment. We said, let's learn from them. And what they did is they were super clear about their values. What are the things that they stood for? What are the things that they hired by? And at that point, the 3 of us wrote down the things that were non-negotiable for us as we were about to embark on hiring a team and building a company culture, of which, our aspirations were always to swing for the fence. Say, what if one day we were lucky enough to build an independent, maybe publicly traded company? What if we were able to build a brand that could help define a generation, much like Sony did in the 80s, or Nike did in the 90s, or Apple did in the early 2000s? Our imagination kept inspiring us and helping us to dream and think really big. I have to attribute that to, a lot of that to RISD. And little did I know, Molly, that going to design school would actually turn out to be amazing education and preparation for entrepreneurship.
How so?
Well, I studied industrial design and graphic design. And I mean, anyone studying art in general, you learn how to imagine something that doesn't yet exist. And then you learn how to make it real. You learn how to translate an idea or an observation into a sketch or a design, and then into a prototype, and then into testing with customers, and then into figuring out the scalability of it and the manufacturing of it, whether it's a physical product or scaling the code of it, whether it's on the internet. I look back fondly on my time at RISD as, wow, like it really set me up for what I now know to be a key component of entrepreneurship, which is imagining that which doesn't exist and then figuring out how to make it real.
It is so cool to hear you explain that, because candidly, when you look back at your resume, if you will, your bio, you're like, wow, design school, Airbnb, how does that, right, go together? I mean, that's candidly what came up for me when I read. I thought, wow, interesting. But that makes complete sense, right? That imagination, I love it. What would you, when you talked about culture, tell me about the Airbnb culture, and at some level, what are you most proud of?
Well, the Airbnb culture is really, I think, a reflection of the values of Brian, Nate, and I. Any company's culture, I believe, is the reflection of its founders. And so ours happens to be this combination of art and science, of our head in the clouds and our feet on the ground. We've designed a culture that is incredibly optimistic. One of our values is be a host. It's a nod to our platform, and it's a nod to the idea that our business is only as successful as to the degree our hosts take care of their guests. For us to know what good hosting looks like out in the world, we need to start internally inside our company. So we need to be good hosts to each other inside Airbnb. Another one of our values is be a serial entrepreneur, and that's serial with a C.
I love it.
Which is about being scrappy and hustling,
totally.
And turning obstacles into opportunities, not giving up, and finding ways to barrel through and figure stuff out. So I'm very, very proud of what we've created internally. A culture will exist whether you design it or not.
Yeah, sure.
A culture will emerge. Every organization has a culture. And so we committed very early on to let's be the authors of it. Let's actually intentionally design it. It's going to happen anyway. So we might as well.
Right.
We might as well design it in favorably to what we want. And that's truly a reflection of us. And what I'm most proud of is the stories I get from our alumni, of which there are now many, many alums out in the world. A lot of them have become entrepreneurs. And I'm most proud that they reference our culture in creating theirs.
Joe, we talked about drive a minute ago, and you exhibit drive in so many ways. But I want to ask you, do you associate the word drive to be positive or negative? Because the world has a lot of different associations with that word. What comes up for you with the word drive?
I only associate it as positive. When you say drive, I just had this flashback to cross country, which I ran in high school.
Mm-hmm.
Brookwood High. Brookwood High School. That's right. I remember that experience as being very formative for me because the training and the races were some of the most grueling experiences physically and mentally that I had at that point in my life as, 15, 16, 17-year-old kid. What I remember most is the feeling during training where you wanted to quit, where I wanted to quit, where it was, it's hot outside, the sun's blasting in the hot Georgia afternoon, and you're exhausted. One of our coaches actually had this thing called Hell Tuesdays.
Oh, that doesn't sound good.
You had to run like 2 1 miles and then like 5 800s, like all back to back, no rest. And it was grueling. But I remember in those moments of wanting to quit, he'd say, like, you've got one more in you. Keep going. And it was the first time where I experienced being able to overcome that voice in my mind that was trying to tell me it's too uncomfortable, you need to stop. And I was able to challenge and say, well, I could probably do one more lap. I could probably keep going. And sure enough, of course I could. And in those races, I remember competing, in cross country, always feeling like if I crossed the finish line and I could still walk, that was energy that I left on the course that could have been for a faster race.
Hi again, it's Molly. I hope you're enjoying the show. If you're a go-getter who wants to conquer overwhelm and sharpen your focus, I want to let you know about my new free webinar training, Purposeful Productivity. This free webinar gives you a framework to unlock more energy for what matters most and to finally beat burnout. Head over to mollyfletcher.com/webinar to access this free training and my new life-changing energy management framework. That's mollyfletcher.com/webinar. You recently stepped down from Airbnb's day-to-day operations, et cetera. And, you're continuing on, of course, as a board member and a chairman of Airbnb.org. But get me inside of that transition a little bit. What's next for you, Airbnb.org, sort of all of that.
So I stepped aside from the day-to-day only after the company was in an amazing place post-COVID. We got through an incredible disruption of travel. We have had record quarters this year in 2022. My relationship with my co-founders is the best it's ever been, and we keep hiring amazing talent inside Airbnb. I'll be connected for my life. It's Airbnb's. It's so much of a part of my life, part of my DNA. Like it's just no matter if I have a formal relationship with the company or not, it's always a part of who I am. And so I'm excited to think about what's next. I'm not rushing into anything. There's a lot of other problems that need solving in the world. Definitely excited about, taking on another startup at some point. I really feel like this next decade of my life could be the most creative and productive yet. I've been able to have some incredible experiences that I can build on top of knowing how to form teams, how to pursue ideas, how to ship products, etc. And so in the meantime, I'm very engaged with Airbnb.org, which is part of our platform I got to help launch that helps house people in times of crisis. We learned pretty early on that when people are displaced from a natural disaster, our hosts not only have the space, but they also have the generosity to take people in. We saw it going back to Hurricane Sandy in New York in 2012, when our host emailed us and said, "Dear Airbnb, I've got 4 extra guest rooms in Brooklyn. How do I volunteer these for free to those displaced by the hurricane?" And at the time, there was no way to have a free transaction on the site. That's not a business. But we reconfigured everything in a matter of days. And before we knew it, we had a few hundred people in New York offering homes. Mayor Bloomberg partnered with us to help promote it at the time. And it kicked off what is now today Airbnb.org. We've housed people in pretty much every major natural disaster that you've seen on TV. Our hosts have stepped up. We take the same matching that we use to match people with vacation homes, and we apply that to those who are fleeing a hurricane or a wildfire or an earthquake and need shelter quickly. To date, we've housed over 150,000 people around the world. And along the way, we got involved in a very global topic, which is a refugee resettlement. And we learned that as the refugee situation continues to grow, there's now over 100 million people displaced around the world, that our hosts can offer shelter and home in times of need. And so with the Afghanistan situation last summer, we committed to helping house 20,000 Afghan families in the United States. And with the Ukraine situation earlier this year, we committed to housing 100,000 people fleeing Ukraine. And I'm really, really proud of our team. They have helped achieve that goal just last month. We announced that we achieved 100,000 and we're increasing the goal at this point. So it's just really cool to see how a business can take something that it has expertise in our case, housing, and extend beyond the business to go get involved in problems in society. And I really think that going forward, more and more businesses are finding ways and customers and their employees that work at these companies are demanding that companies do more than just make money, that they find ways to be good for society.
Good for you. Those numbers are staggering. And I know that this is where you're pouring your heart and soul a good bit right now. Is that right?
Yeah. This is an area of philanthropy that I'm involved in with the UNHCR, with other organizations, tent.org. For anybody listening that wants to get involved with their company, tent.org is an amazing place to go learn more. Obviously on Airbnb.org, people can learn about how they can host in their home or contribute to help fund the housing for those who've been displaced.
Yeah, that's awesome, Joe. Listen, you've been incredibly generous with your time. I'm going to hit you with some rapid fire, and then we can wrap it up. What is the coolest Airbnb you've ever stayed at?
Oh, man. The coolest Airbnb was at a Buddhist temple in the rural Japan. You stay with a monk on a tatami mat for $60 a night, and you live the life of a Japanese Buddhist monk.
Wow.
You eat breakfast, you meditate, you go into the village together, you perform rituals with him. His name is Hosan, and it was one of the most enlightening Airbnb experiences I've ever had. I saw Japanese culture in a way that you couldn't get anywhere else. And I feel so grateful to him.
What's the best book you've read in the last year?
The Truth by Neil Strauss. It's an amazing book on relationships.
Really?
It's funny. It's insightful. I was laughing out loud probably every other page, it's hard for a book to make you laugh out loud.
For sure. So, Joe, if you had to boil your success down to 3 words, what would those be? Imagination,
problem solving, persistence.
I love it.
Something I've learned around a quality of successful people are the ones who turn the feeling of wanting to stop into a feeling of wanting to continue.
All right. So in the last year, is there a new habit that you've unlocked, or are there any habits and rituals that you consistently lean into that have changed the way you show up every day?
I hit the gym every morning. And for me, it's my form of meditation. I'm in my body. It makes it easy to not think about other things when I'm pushing heavy weight.
Yep.
And it's also a time where I'm challenging myself. One more rep. I know I got it in me. Yes, I can.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's like the best way to start the day, because I come out of there and I'm exhausted, I'm gassed, and I feel like I push myself to my physical limit, and I love surprising myself. I love when I can do one more pull-up, even though my body says no.
That's so good. I love it.
From there, it's like, the rest of the day becomes a little bit more downhill.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one thing I did take up, which I'm getting back into, is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I was rolling up until the pandemic, and now I'm going to get back into it here in Austin. And it was an incredible way to start the day, because when you're wrestling somebody and they're trying to choke you out or put you in an arm bar, there's nothing else you can think about. And suddenly everything in the rest of the day doesn't seem quite as difficult.
As breathing.
You recalibrate, quote, what's hard or what's uncomfortable. And I always found that, putting myself in situations where are uncomfortable and powering through them have always been helpful for me.
You could, Joe, one last question. Who is a game changer, or what is a game changer that inspires you, and why?
Charles and Ray Eames. They were a design duo from the mid-20th century that had a purpose of bringing the best design to the most people for the least price. Their whole ethos was about democratizing good design. When I learned about them in my first year at RISD, I switched from being a fine arts major to being a design major because I was so inspired by using design to improve the world, by using design to make things better than they were today. I'm indebted to them. And in fact, I've started an organization called the Eames Institute of Infinite Curiosity.
Wow.
Which is a whole organization dedicated to furthering the legacy of Charles and Ray Eames.
Wow. And how do people find out about this? This is, I mean...
You can go to eamesinstitute.org.
Okay. And how do you spell Eames?
EAMES.
Got it. Okay, institute.org.
That's right. Because their lessons still apply today. They were problem solvers.
Yeah.
They were designers. Sure. They were committed to making the world better through design. And I hope that through this organization, others out there can have the same aha moment that I did.
Joe, I got to tell you, I interviewed some pretty special people, but this was pretty awesome. I learned so much, and I personally am taking away so much. So thank you so much.
Molly, it was such a pleasure to be with you.
What a great conversation. Boy, I got to tell you, I loved this one. Here are a few of my favorite takeaways from my conversation with Joe. Number one, you always have one more rep. You know the feeling that you get when you're working out and you are exhausted and you really just want to quit? When it's so uncomfortable, those moments happen in life all the time too. In those moments of discomfort, train your inner voice to say, I've got one more in me. And guess what? You always do. This comment, this mindset, it reminded me of my conversation with soccer star Carly Lloyd. It was episode 66, and her personal mantra, I love it, empty the tank. So good. Number two, turn your doubts into fuel. There will always be people who belittle your ambitions, who tell you that you can't do it, that your idea will never work. Doubters, they can crush dreams. But what I was reminded of by Joe is that doubt can also fuel your dreams. It's all about our mindset. And number three, don't lose your sense of imagination. Airbnb began as a crazy dream, but Joe and his business partners, they never were afraid to imagine openly, to dream out loud. And in doing so, they completely reimagined the way that we live and travel. Like Joe said, a big part of entrepreneurship is imagining that which doesn't exist and figuring out how to make it real. We can't do that if we don't allow a sense of curiosity, of possibility, of imagination, and dream in our work. Thanks, as always, for listening to Game Changers with Molly Fletcher. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts. There you can listen to previous episodes and leave us a review, which helps other people find out about the show. This episode was edited and sound designed by the team at Sound On Studios. You can find out more about their work at soundonsoundoff.com. Check it out. For more about me, visit mollyfletcher.com. Until next time, stay curious and be bold.